We're going to get into the story about Netanyahu. This is really interesting. It appears that Bibi is concerned that the ICC is going to issue an arrest warrant for him. Now, this is huge considering the fact that, obviously, as we've stated multiple times on this show, Israel seems to have this idea that they cannot not only be criticized, they cannot be held accountable, right? But there are rumors now swirling that they may be willing to move forward to issue an arrest warrant to Netanyahu. We're going to get into that story, and then I'm going to explain to you what the U.S. response is in reference to this. I think Bibi should go to jail. I think they should arrest him for violating, and committing crimes against humanity. But whether or not it's actually going to happen, we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't hold my breath just yet. Let's get into this segment here.
Raf, I do want to ask you about one other piece of news we've got here. NBC News learning that Israel is concerned that the International Criminal Court could soon issue an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as other senior Israeli officials. What is the background on this? What are you hearing?
Right. So an Israeli official tells me this morning that Israel is concerned those arrest warrants could come potentially as early as this week. Prime Minister Netanyahu, the defense minister, potentially senior Israeli officials. We asked the International Criminal Court about this. They said that they would not comment on any potential future arrest warrants, but they have confirmed that they have opened up an investigation into the situation in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. This Israeli official tells me that Israel is working through diplomatic channels to try to make sure that those warrants are not issued. It is not clear at this point whether the court also intends to issue warrants for the arrest of senior Hamas leaders, which is a possibility. Now, this would not lead to the immediate arrest of Netanyahu and others, but it could make it potentially quite difficult for the Israeli prime minister to travel to Europe, to travel to other countries that are signatories to the International Criminal Court, because in theory, those countries could find that they have an obligation to arrest the prime minister. This would put Prime Minister Netanyahu in the same category as Vladimir Putin, who had an arrest warrant issued against him for alleged war crimes committed in Ukraine. We should say, Savannah, the International Criminal Court is separate from the International Court of Justice, which is...
Pause for a second. So do you see what he's basically saying? So long story short, if they were to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, then that means they see him the same as they see Vladimir Putin. Israel's reputation is already damaged, but that would damage their reputation even more. Right? But don't get it twisted, because I really don't think this is going to happen. And we'll get into the details as to why I think that in just a second. Again, we have to remember, when it comes to Israel, they are often not held accountable. Now, he's breaking down the difference between the ICC and the ICJ.
In Ukraine, we should say, Savannah, the International Criminal Court is separate from the International Court of Justice, which is right now hearing a case on whether or not Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, an allegation Israel denies.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated.
Okay, so that is huge news coming through. And Netanyahu actually is also concerned about this, apparently. I want to actually go to that first. I want you to hear Netanyahu's response about the possibility of him being arrested. Now, again, remember, he is the one to play the victim. He likes to try to play the victim. Israel has never done anything wrong in his eyes. So just keep that in mind when you hear this statement from him. He's the guy that seems to think that he cannot be touched. Zachariah says, Bibi Netanyahu. Oh, you mean that Philly guy, Ben Melowaski? Zachary coming in with the punch.
You have to hear this to believe this. The International Criminal Court in The Hague is contemplating issuing arrest warrants against senior Israeli government and military officials as war criminals. This would be an outrage of historic proportions. International bodies like the ICC arose in the wake of the Holocaust committed against the Jewish people.
So we're not even 30 seconds in, and he's already mentioned the Holocaust. We're not even 30 seconds in. You see what happens here? Because according to Bibi, they are not allowed, The Hague, which is in the Netherlands, they are not allowed to hold Israel accountable. They're not even like, you can't even criticize Israel, according to Bibi.
They were set up to prevent such horrors, to prevent future genocides. Yet now, the International Court is trying to put Israel in the dock. It's trying to put us in the dock as we defend ourselves against genocidal terrorists and regimes, Iran, of course, that openly works to destroy the one and only Jewish state.
When did Iran and Hamas commit a genocide against Israelis? You see, this goes back to this statement of defending oneself, because the thing is, Israel and the US government and the Western allies as well, they have made it very clear that the only country in that region that has a right to defend itself apparently is Israel. No one else does. So if you are captured and you've been in prison, you have family members that have been imprisoned by the IDF, children, people tortured, beaten, occupied, oppressed, you're not allowed to defend yourself. Let that sink in for a second, guys. Let me just let that sink in. If you are imprisoned, remember, it's not like when they arrest the Palestinians, it's not like they go to court. They just grab people up off the street. They'll pull Palestinians out of a home, even if it's not the person they came there for. They'll take someone else and arrest them. So it's not like they have like this court of justice that they appear in and they're rightfully tried. But if you are occupied and you are oppressed and you are beaten and they put you on a caloric diet and all this kind of things, you are not allowed to defend yourself. How is that any different from the same ideology that people had in this country, that plantation owners had in this country against people who were enslaved? That the slaves weren't allowed to defend themselves. So to that same logic, these people would also be against Nat Turner's rebellion. They would be against the Haitian slave rebellion. But see, they don't like it when you bring that up. No one else is allowed to defend themselves except for Israel.
Branding Israel's leaders and soldiers as war criminals will pour jet fuel on the fires of anti-Semitism, those fires that are already raging on the campuses of America and across capitals around the world. It will also be the first time that a democratic country fighting for its life according to the rules of war is itself accused of war crimes.
You have not been following the rules of war, right? They keep saying they're going after Hamas. They're just indiscriminately bombing civilians. This has not just been something that I said. This has been reported by multiple organizations and human rights organizations as well. So there's that. They have committed war crimes. They are not following the rules of war. Do you hear the gaslighting that is coming from Netanyahu's mouth? The lies, lies after lie after lie.
The Israeli army, the IDF, is one of the most moral militaries in the world. It takes endless measures to prevent civilian casualties, measures that no other army takes. It does so while fighting a terrorist enemy, which uses its own civilians as human shields.
Was it moral for the IDF to kill 3 of their own hostages when they were waving a white flag? Was that moral? Was it moral for the IDF to block food from getting into Gaza? That's moral. Was it moral for them to take the food and set the food and supplies on fire in the trucks? That's a moral army? You have to be a real sociopath to sit up there and tell these types of lies, knowing what you have done to those people. There's just no way.
You know the truth. Hamas places its weapons, its terrorists, in hospitals, schools, mosques, and throughout civilian areas. They do this in order to win immunity and to maximize civilian casualties. So while Hamas shows no care for the lives of Palestinians and steals humanitarian aid meant for civilians, Israel is facilitating a surge of humanitarian assistance to Gaza.
Another lie. If Israel cares so much about the Palestinian lives, he says that Hamas is purposely putting civilians in harm's way. Let's think about this, folks. Is Hamas the one that is kicking Palestinians out of their homes in the West Bank? Or is that Israeli settlers? Who's kicking Palestinians out of their homes in the West Bank? Is that Hamas too? Who's bombing Lebanon? Who's bombing Syria? That is Israel. Who put the Palestinian people in an open air prison where a lot of them in Gaza are refugees? Was that Hamas? No, that was Israel. Hamas was born in the rubble. So now he is trying to put Israel's crimes on Hamas. Unbelievable.
And we do this to ensure that the Palestinian population's humanitarian needs are met, rather than commend Israel for abiding by the rules of war while fighting an enemy that violates every rule of war.
How are they meeting the humanitarian needs of the Palestinian people when they were blocking the humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza? How are they meeting the needs of the humanitarian needs of the Palestinian people when they put the Palestinians in Gaza on a caloric diet?
Including holding 133 Israeli men, women, and children hostage. Who's the ICC targeting? The democracy called Israel. And in targeting Israel, the ICC would be targeting all democracies because it would be undermining their inherent right to defend themselves against savage terrorism and wanton aggression. Clearly, this threat by the ICC is not an attempt to enforce the law. Israel is not even subject to the court's jurisdiction, and it has an independent legal system that rigorously investigates all violations of the law.
Hold on to that thought right there. Why is Israel, according to him, not subjugated to the ICC's decision? Last time I checked, the I in ICC stands for international. What does he mean that the court's ruling doesn't apply to them? So it applies to every other country except for Israel. Again, no accountability.
Rather, this ICC attempt is an attempt to paralyze Israel's very ability to defend itself. The government and people of Israel reject outright this grave threat to our security, this grave threat to our very existence. And I want to assure you, no ICC action will impact Israel's ironclad determination to achieve the goals of our war with Hamas terrorists.
So there it is right there, folks. That's Netanyahu letting you know that he is putting himself and putting Israel above the law. He is telling you there is nothing that the ICC or, of course, the ICJ can do that is going to stop him from going into Rafah. We'll get to that in just a second. There is nothing. He's going to do what he wants to do. Now, he says that the people of Israel do not stand with this court. The people of Israel don't stand with you. That's why your approval rating is so low. These hostages that you said you care so much about, how many of those hostages have probably been killed by all the bombing that you've been committing towards Gaza? Multiple opportunities for a hostage exchange. You didn't want those hostages back. He never cared about those hostages. I said this from day one. If it was really about the hostages, you would try to do everything that you could to get them back and get them back safely. It was never about that. It was about destroying Gaza at all means necessary, taking over the land, taking over the resources that exist there, and pushing the Palestinian people, what's left of them, into Egypt and other countries where they'll become refugees there as well. And whoever else is left, they were going to destroy. They want the land. They want the resources.
We will destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities in Gaza. We will release all our hostages, and we will ensure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. Israel expects the leaders of the free world to stand firmly against the ICC outrageous assault on Israel's inherent right of self-defense. We expect them to use all the means at their disposal to stop this dangerous move. 6 months after the terrible Hamas massacre of October 7th, 80 years after the horrors of the Holocaust, the Jewish state calls on decent people everywhere to reject this outrage by the ICC, to stand with Israel as we fight the barbarians of Hamas in Iran and as we work to secure a more peaceful world.
It's just laughable when you think about it. A more peaceful world, he says. The government that is preventing a more peaceful world is Israel. They're the ones who are the attacker. They have been the aggressor all along before October 7th. Notice he had to throw in Holocaust again. Netanyahu says the law does not apply to him or Israel. And you know who else is saying this? The State Department. Now we're going to bring in this guy, and I was calling him this. I got to take it back. Because Sagar and Jetty actually posted a tweet where he says he's tired of people saying that he looks like this guy, that this guy doesn't look like him. So we're not going to call him fake. I'm not going to call him imitation Sagar. But this guy here from the State Department, Patel, he's going to also let you know that the laws, the international laws, do not apply to Israel. Everyone needs to take note of this because it's happening right in front of your face. Shout out to Asel Rod for capturing this. Laws don't apply to Israel. Here he is.
But the crux of this for the United States is that we do not believe that the ICC has jurisdiction on this. That being said, we work closely with the ICC in a number of key areas. We think that they do important work as it relates to Ukraine, Darfur, Sudan. But again, on this particular instance, they just do not have jurisdiction.
Listen again.
The crux of this for the United States is that we do not believe that the ICC has jurisdiction on this. That being,
he said the United States doesn't believe that the ICJ does not have jurisdiction when it comes to Israel. Now, this is the international court. How much do they pay this guy to come out there and tell these lies? Listen to this part.
Said we work closely with the ICC in a number of key areas. We think that they do important work as it relates to Ukraine, Darfur, Sudan. But
he said that they do important work when it comes to Ukraine, Darfur, and Sudan, but not when it comes to Israel, not when it comes to Gaza. You see how that works? How do you not have jurisdiction when it is the international court? So every other country falls up under the ICJ except for Israel? They're the only ones that cannot be brought to justice? They're the only ones that cannot be held accountable? That is a form of supremacy, ladies and gentlemen. And we cannot sit here and allow other people to believe that it's not. What is the deal with this preferential treatment? What is the deal with this? These are the deals that the U.S. has made with the devil.
Again, on this particular instance, they just do not have jurisdiction.
Do you see this? So this guy is paid to lie. We've seen him multiple times. They don't have jurisdiction. Now check this out. The United States government is already trying to prevent the ICC from punishing Israel for war crimes. I kid you not. See how they're coming to Israel's defense? ICC urged to delay possible war crimes charges against Israel and Hamas. Listen to this. Boy, I tell you, this is a mess. Diplomats from the G7 industrialized nations have urged officials at the International Criminal Court not to announce war crime charges against Israel or Hamas officials amid concerns that such a move could disrupt the chances of the chances of a breakthrough in ceasefire talks. So let's go ahead and debunk the first narrative. Ceasefire talks? How is there a chance of ceasefire talks when Netanyahu just told you and has said multiple times that he is going to do what he wants to do? He is going to go into Rafah. Guys, this is misleading. This is a joke. This is to make the American people, particularly, the Guardian mainly supports the Democratic Party, right? So this is to give Democrat voters or people who may not want to vote for Biden because of the Gaza issue, this is to give them some type of hope that there's going to be such a deal made. Israeli politicians, including the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have suggested that the ICC could press charges imminently after an investigation launched in 2021 that covers events starting in 2014. The inquiry has also been looking at Israel's construction of settlements in occupied territory. So look at this. They don't even want the ICC to press charges against Israel when it comes to the West Bank. The ICC has not commented officially and has advised diplomats that it is not aware of any dramatic moves in the investigation. The prosecutor, Karim Khan, must have any request for an arrest warrant validated by 3 judges. And this final step would have to be completed if charges were to be announced this week. But Israel appeared to be taking the rumors of imminent arrest warrants so seriously that late on Sunday, the foreign minister, Israel Katz, sent messages to Israel's embassies abroad advising them to prepare for a severe anti-Semitic backlash should the court take action. So look, this is already in motion. Check this out. So the Zionist network already has this in their back pocket. If the International Court is to go and issue an arrest warrant towards Netanyahu, they already got a whole network and a whole propaganda campaign that they are going to implement to basically say that even arresting Netanyahu for war crimes is anti-Semitic. When I say it's an entire network, it is an entire network. They already got the propaganda ready to go. Reports in Israeli media suggested the warrants could potentially be against Netanyahu, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and the IDF chief of staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halavi. Katz said there is nothing more distorted than attempting to prevent Israel from defending itself against a murderous enemy. See, everybody's the enemy except for Israel. Openly calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. First of all, the Hamas charter has been updated, and the current charter does not call for the destruction of the state of Israel. We've debunked that multiple times before on the show. And then 2, let's say it did. What seems to be more obvious to you? Someone calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, or someone actually destroying an area right before our eyes? What has been destroyed? Gaza. Gaza has been demolished. Gaza is done. Done. And I've seen multiple videos and multiple pictures. Gaza is done. So you actually have Gaza, which has been demolished right in front of our eyes. And the media, the New York Times, the Guardian, they're all in bed with the Israel. They all just in bed with the same State Department talking points. How can you say that it's more dangerous that someone may be calling for, and again, like I said, the charter has changed, may be calling for the destruction of the state of Israel versus the actual destruction and demolition of Gaza. It's just like if there were two people fighting and there's one person that says, that threatens that they're going to hit the other person. But then the person over here actually has beaten people up. Are you more concerned about the one that is actually beating someone up or the one that says they may beat someone up? It's very telling, you guys. Very telling. So I don't know if Netanyahu is going to be arrested, but that brings us to this point as well, because, you know, Nicaragua actually brought Germany to the ICJ because Nicaragua wants Germany to stop arming Israel. We have to remember, Germany is number 2. When we look at the countries that are arming Israel, the U.S. is giving Israel the most weapons and aid, and Germany is second. And it's embarrassing to me too. I spent most of my childhood in Germany, and I'm really disappointed with Germany because it makes me, you know, I think about the times when I sat there in history class, and my teacher was German. I sat there in history class and they told us what they learned from the Holocaust, and they acknowledged it and they addressed it and they understood what was wrong, and they made sure they would never repeat this again. And here we are in 2024, and it's very clear to me that they really didn't learn anything, because it seems like they seem to only think that only applies to Israel. It only applies to the Israeli people. Genocide can happen to anyone. Anyone. You think this is something? Over 6 million killed in the Congo. 6 million killed in the Congo. It's happened to other countries. So where was Germany then? The ICJ rejected Nicaragua's requests. The ICJ is also afraid of Israel, and they can't tell me that they're not, because you can't sit there and you see this country has basically destroyed Gaza. You see all the children that they've killed. You see the IDF has killed some of their own hostages. You see it on video, and you cave when it's right in front of you. Listen to this from Al Jazeera.
The United Nations top court has just ruled against ordering Germany to halt arms sales to Israel. The case was filed by Nicaragua and accused Germany of failing to prevent genocide in Gaza by continuing to sell arms to Israel. It's the latest case involving Israel before the International Court of Justice. South Africa approached the court in December, accusing Israel of committing genocide.
By 15 votes to 1, find that the circumstances, as they now present themselves to the court, are not such as to require the exercise of its power under Article 41 of the statute to indicate provisional measures.
Let's go live to Al Jazeera's Willem Marks, who's at The Hague for us. So, Willem.
So you heard that. It was 15-1.
Tell us more about what the court said today to explain their decision not to issue provisional measures.
Well, Folly, there were two specific issues. One was very much factual. Let's start with that. They accepted the statements made by the German legal team that since October the 7th, not only has there been a massive reduction in the value of their military-related transfers to Israel, but the vast majority, around 98% of the value of all those transfers was for non-lethal material. They acknowledged there had been 300 anti-tank missiles sold from Germany into Israel. They said that therefore there was not a huge amount of indication that German support for the Israeli military was helping that Israeli military operate inside Gaza. Secondarily, they pointed out that given the claim from Nicaragua was that Germany was in violation of the Genocide Convention, the court has previously itself not yet ruled that Israel is violating that convention, and therefore there was no legal standing right now for them to issue these so-called provisional measures against Germany, because Germany itself is not seen to be supporting a state that is itself in violation of the convention. That was essentially the two key acceptances and part of that ruling from the court today.
Now, do you see why? Think about what he just said. Now, do you see why I was not happy with the ruling from the ICJ when they actually didn't call for a permanent ceasefire? Because see, now everything goes back to that ruling that they made before. Because now what they're able to say is that, well, technically Germany isn't doing anything wrong because the court never called for a permanent ceasefire, and the court didn't rule that Israel was committing a genocide. The court ruled that they need to do everything in their power to prevent a genocide from happening. This is why I was so frustrated when the court did not have that firm language. Everything goes back to that ruling now.
And what has Nicaragua said following this ruling? What is going to be their next step now?
So their agent ambassador has come out here to speak just a few minutes ago in front of the court. It's important to note that Germany had sought for this case to essentially be dismissed at this point. That would normally only happen, the court said, were there questions around jurisdiction. There are no such questions around jurisdiction, so they said that the case would continue. And Carlos Jose Aguelo Gomez, the agent ambassador for Nicaragua, spoke to us just a few moments ago to the press pack gathered out here, saying the case will continue despite the ICJ ruling against the emergency request. The ruling doesn't mean, he said, that Germany did not violate international rules. And of course, this could go on, Folly, for many, many years. Hence.
You guys hear that? Yes, Trauma Queen, the court is rigged. This is some evil shit. Yes, it is very much rigged. You guys see this? So long story short, guys, he just told you that it doesn't mean that Germany hasn't violated any of the rules. But he also goes on to say that this could take years. Like, this is a joke. I am very embarrassed and ashamed of Germany. You know better. And for some reason, you have it in your head that the only people that a genocide can be committed against is the Israeli people. So that tells me you didn't really learn that much, bud. You didn't really learn that much as you say that you have. But I'm also disappointed with the ICJ because the ICJ can't actually enforce these rulings, and they know that. That is where the UN Security Council is supposed to come in next, and they're supposed to be the ones to enforce it. And then what happens there? The United States is usually the only country to raise their hand and stop those things from happening. So unfortunately, Nicaragua's case against Germany did not go through. Doesn't mean that Germany is not at fault, but it does mean that nothing is going to change there in reference to Germany supplying weapons to Israel. They can still continue to do that. You know, shout out to Nicaragua for trying and being brave enough to do so where other countries were not. But I told you guys, they are going to try to drag this out as long as they can. Who knows how many people, how many Palestinians will be left by then? This is why I said we can't stop the protests. And the weather is starting to change. We're about to enter the warmer month. Actually, depending on where you live, it's probably already sunny and warm. So the protests, those are just getting started. And I'm really proud of all of you that have been able to protest, because the thing is I honestly didn't expect the protests to last as long as they have. Should Bibi be arrested? Absolutely, 100%. 100%. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and take that poll that's pinned to the live chat. I'm curious to see if you guys think that's going to happen or not. Leroy says it's 93 here in Vegas. Good God. It's April 30th and it's already 90 degrees in Vegas. That is insane. I could not, Leroy. Yikes. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Zaldivar. Best Reading Rainbow episode was with DMX. LOL. I did not see that. That would be interesting. Vicious E says the ICC is false hope. Only making citizens arrest or worse will stop the bastards. Thank you, David. Israel is the mini-me to America's Dr. Evil. Yeah. Austin Powers, that's right. Thank you, Mitchell? Sinitchell? The moral military has a called Hannibal directive. Thank you, Brock. Israel didn't sign anything, so they can do whatever they want. The U.S. acts like a divorced, overbearing parent, letting the kid dictate everything. Israel is in charge here. I mean, do you guys even feel that the U.S. is really in charge? It's very clear what's happening. What a mess. Thank you, Miss B777. AIPAC runs the USA. It's so apparent, it's disturbing. Yep. And this is why I appreciate all the people that have been revealing a lot of these videos on social media. Mastermind says, Germany got gaslit into believing that Zionists have always been innocents. There it is. There it is. JB says, Sabs, someone made a point that calling for the end of Israel is like calling for the end of Czechoslovakia. Oh, I remember Czechoslovakia. The people still exist, but it's now two states. Israel can be dissolved into Palestine. That's a good point. Yeah, because I don't know if everyone remembers, but before it was like the Czech Republic, it was Czechoslovakia, and then they split it into two. That's a good reference there. Shout out to Jasmine Harrell for the super chat. Thank you. And 100 Black Roke says they have been given a pass to destruction since 1921 and before. Shout out to Black Roke, who's been a member for 9 months on the show. Thank you so much. Well said there. Well said. I got to remember that Czechoslovakia one. That's a good one. Let's take a look at that poll. How did you guys vote? Will Bibi go to jail? Let's check it out, folks. All right, 69 votes. Do you believe Netanyahu will be arrested? 22% of you said yes, 62% said no, and 15% said you're not sure. It was closer earlier. Yes and no were actually closer than I thought they would be, but that's interesting. Well.